Hey guys, how are you all doing? Welcome to the MMA breakdown, and these are my predictions for UFC Fight Night 56, Shogun versus St. Preux, the second event taking place this next weekend, along with Fight Night 55, Rockhold versus Bisping, which I already have my predictions up for, so check those out as well. But Shogun versus St. Preux. I was looking forward to seeing Jimmy Manuwa fight Shogun, but I think this switch up here has a little more added excitement for me. I just think St. Preux and Shogun, I think, is kind of a better matchup. I don't think St. Preux is as good a fighter as Jimmy Manuwa, but I thought the St. Preux Barroso fight, I thought that was pretty awful. A real waste of St. Preux's time. I thought he was gonna, just run over him, and I didn't think Barroso was an appropriate opponent at all for St. Preux from his performances in the UFC. I think he's a pretty low-level, pretty bad fighter, Barroso. And Jimmy Manuwa and Shogun, I was pretty convinced that Manuwa was going to beat him. And now with St. Preux, I think this is a much better test for St. Preux than it would have been for Manuwa. Preux, I think, has looked good, but hasn't really beaten any top guys. Obviously, coming off of the loss to Bader, which I thought he competed very well in that fight, even though he got out wrestled. And here, I don't know. I don't feel too strongly about either guy. I think it's a much more even fight, and a lot more questions are going to be answered here about St. Preux and about what Hua has left going forward with this fight. Whereas with the Jimmy Manuwa fight, I thought I felt pretty convinced that was going to be a strong showing for Manuwa. But I think St. Preux definitely this is going to be a challenge for him. But anyway, let's get to the predictions. My quick thoughts on the rest of the card. A couple of interesting matchups on the main card. Other than that, it's typical UFC Fight Pass quality, which is not good. I say it almost every time there's a Fight Pass card. I'm not a fan of a lot of the fights they put on Fight Pass. A lot of filler fights in these events, and same deal here for the most part. Let's get to it. So starting off with the this event isn't even on Fight Pass. I was getting it mixed up with the Rockhold Bisping card, which is on Fight Pass. This is on Fox Sports 1. Sorry about that, but still, nonetheless, pretty low quality fight card here, aside from a handful of fights on the main card. But starting off with the Fight Pass preliminary card at welterweight, Wagner Silva versus Colby Covington. Wagner Silva, veteran from the most recent installment of TUF Brazil 3. I wasn't impressed with him in the house at all. I can't remember the fighter he lost to in the house, but he fought Demente Abreu in the finale and got knocked out, I think, in the second round. But Abreu, I actually thought, was a talented fighter from that season, and I actually thought he got robbed against Marcio Alexandre Jr. In the semifinal fight, and I definitely thought Abreu should have been fighting against Worley Alves in the finale. But still, Silva got pretty much dominated against Abreu, and I just don't think he's really effective with any part of his game. With it, seeing his performance in the house and then against Abreu, just kind of a forgettable fighter. And Colby Covington fight on the McCall card, beat Anying Wang, pretty much ran over him, knocked him out in the first round, was able to take him down, has the wrestling background, and not knowing much about either of these fighters, I think that wrestling is probably, that's what I would guess is going to win the fight here. So I'm going to go with Covington. I think both these guys are still unknown guys for the most part, at least to people who only watch the UFC like me. And I'm going to go with Covington. Moving on to the Fox Sports 2 preliminary card, and I really hope that they put these prelims on Fight Pass like they did with, I can't remember which card it was, but a Fox Sports 1 card in the, I think last month or in September, they put the prelims on Fight Pass, which was great. It's the first time they ever did that, and I really hope they do that here. It's just very frustrating that they continue to put fights exclusively on Fox Sports 2, which nobody gets, and is just really just a channel that is irrelevant. But the first fight on the Fox Sports 2 preliminary card at bantamweight, Thomas Almeida, newcomer, taking on Tim Gorman. I can't make a pick here. I don't know who Almeida is, but Tim Gorman was on TUF 18. I remember he won his fight to get into the house. I believe it was by knockout, and then got injured, had to leave before he could compete in the house, and fought on the TUF Nations finale on the Fight Pass preliminary card against Mitch Gagnon, who's actually a really talented fighter, and just coming off of a submission win and fighting Hainan Barao next year, or in December, I think. But Gagnon had ran through most of his opponents early in his fights before he fought Gorman, and Gorman was actually able to take him the distance. He did get out wrestled for the majority of the fight, but he seemed to be able to make Gagnon uncomfortable on the feet, more so than he had been with any of his other opponents. So take that for what it's worth. He didn't look particularly impressive, but he did go the distance with Gagnon, who is talented and had been running through people. But I can't make a pick here. I don't know anything about Almeida. And moving on to lightweight, Leandro Silva taking on Charlie Brenneman. Leandro Silva fought Francisco Trinaldo a couple events ago. Got out-clinched. Trinaldo, I remember, was in on his legs, attempting the takedown. Had him press up against the fence for most of the fight. And he fought, I believe, I want to look this up, I believe he lost to Ildemar Alcantara about a year and a half ago. Just give me a second. Yeah, he lost to Ildemar Alcantara about a year and a half ago. Got released, had a 5-fight win streak, came back and lost to Francisco Trinaldo. And Alcantara and Trinaldo both are not very definitely not elite fighters, and I wouldn't even say mid-level, especially Alcantara. Trinaldo a bit higher up on the ladder, but losses to those two guys, I don't think that's too good. I think Brenneman, I would say this is basically an easy win for him. If Trinaldo was able to out-clinch him and take him down a couple times, I definitely think Brenneman, being a persistent wrestler and a strong grappler, will be able to do that to him. But Brenneman, I think, has the worst chin of anyone in the UFC, and maybe any UFC fighter ever. I mean, he's been dropped by everyone, from Beneil Dariush, Castillo knocked him out, Kyle Noak knocked him out, and honestly, if he can't win here, I think that's definitely it for him. I mean, I think he should have retired a couple fights ago, but he's been knocked out a lot in his career. Anthony Johnson a couple years ago, Johnny Hendricks has suffered a lot of knockouts, and I almost feel like anyone who connects cleanly on him, even if they're not a notable knockout artist, can put Brenneman away. But Leandro Silva really hasn't been impressive, and even the guys that have knocked out Brenneman, Dariush, Castillo, are talented fighters. And I'm going to side with Brenneman here. I think he's able to just put pressure on him with the wrestling, get him down, and hopefully keep the fight on the ground, not stand with him, and give Silva a chance to connect on Brenneman. So I'll go with Brenneman here. I think I'll be really sad if he gets knocked out again, but I'll go with Brenneman. Moving on, at welterweight, Diego Lima taking on Pawlak. Diego Lima from TUF 19. The only guy to finish a fight in the house, finished both of his fights, both by submission. Really impressive. I thought he was going to beat Eddie Gordon in the finale, and Eddie Gordon just looked like a completely different fighter and just steamrolled him, knocked him out in the first round early. Pawlak fought Peter Sabata back in the Berlin Fight Pass card back in May, and was really a forgettable performance. I really don't remember how he looked. I just remember Sabata outpointing him, winning that fight. A fairly tedious kickboxing match. So I have to go with Diego Lima just based on his submission skills and aggression, his finishing ability that he showed in the house. I think his chin might be a little suspect. I don't know how good his stand-up is, really, because his wins in the house he mostly got them done on the ground. But I'll go with Lima here. Moving on, Magalhaes taking on Trevor Smith. Two guys who I think are pretty stagnant in the middleweight division, aren't really going anywhere. I think Magalhaes has some more promise, but Magalhaes, this guy's on a bit of a win streak. Lost his first fight in the UFC to Buddy Roberts, but since then has had 3 straight wins. Submitted Carlos Vemola, won a decision against Nick Ring. I remember he was losing that fight, and I thought Nick Ring just really gave that fight away in the last round. And his last fight against Luke Zachrich, just stormed him, blitzed him right when the round started. Only 44 seconds in, got the knockout. That has a Brazilian with some submission skills, obviously, some big power. I don't think he's a technical striker at all. Trevor Smith, on the other hand, a pretty one-dimensional wrestler and not a great wrestler. Was able to out-wrestle Troen in his last fight. Before that, got steamrolled by Talis Leites, taking on Brian Houston. Took on Brian Houston a couple fights ago, and everyone, the consensus on Brian Houston seems to be that he's just not cut out for the UFC. And even in that fight, was able to out-grapple Houston, but really had to resort to the takedowns. And I thought he looked very uncomfortable on his feet. And before that, lost his dad Herman, which was actually a back-and-forth stand-up fight, and losses to Tim Kennedy. I think Magalhaes, with his aggression and power, and won't get caught up in the really slow-paced wrestling game of Trevor Smith. I don't know how Magalhaes' grappling is. I mean, he had the guillotine choke on Vemela, and Vemela was able to get on top of him in that fight, as I remember. So I'd give Smith a chance of out-wrestling him, but I think Magalhaes will probably land something and hurt Smith. We saw Smith put out by Talis Leites, who is, I think, really underrated and a talented fighter and a dangerous striker, but I'm going to go with Magalhaes. I think he connects at some point and hurts him. And the last fight on the Fox Sports 2 preliminary card, featherweights from TUF Latin America, two Mexican fighters, Diego Rivas taking on Rodolfo Rubio, and I'm going to have to talk about what happened in the show here, obviously. I guess if you haven't watched it, don't want to have that spoiled for you, skip over this, but I actually really liked TUF Latin America. Obviously not over yet, a couple fights left. The fighters were a lot more talented than I thought they would be. I mean, I still think they're, very green and obviously pretty far behind, American and Brazilian fighters, some of the other tough series from other countries, but the fights were exciting. Rodolfo Rubio, I'm going to take him to win this fight. He lost to Yair Rodriguez, I believe is his name, who definitely seems to be the best fighter in the house, and I'm picking him to win the finale, even though we don't know his opponent yet. I think he's head and shoulders above everyone in the house, and I'll talk a lot more about what I think of him for the next event, UFC 180. But Rodolfo Rubio won his first fight against Alex Rollo. I was actually he got put on his back a lot in that fight, and nothing seemed to be working for him, and seemed to all of a sudden was attacking with triangles off of his back, and was able to lock up an armbar, and out of nowhere got the submission. So I think he fights hard on the feet, pretty rudimentary, kind of just throws from the hip, wades forward without much setup, and really not even a standard jab cross, just kind of was throwing big bombs. But in his fight with Yair Rodriguez, was able to take him down, but that was all the success he had on the feet. Got hit with a couple kicks, got lit up, and put away, and actually verbally tapped. So I do think he's tough and scrappy, but has also showed some real just mental errors, or things he's done that aren't intelligent. In both of his fights, when he had his opponent in a defensive position, he would drop down on his back, going for the leg lock, and while he didn't end up on bottom due to that, he did give up his position against Yair. He had the waist lock on the feet, and dropped down for that leg lock. Just really low percentage move, and really unintelligent thing to do. So obviously he has some holes, I think, very green, but I'm going to take him here. And Diego Rivas, he lost to Mowgli, I think his name, it's his nickname, I can't remember all these guys' names, but he lost that fight, and from what I remember, I think he was winning that fight, but got just was overcome by his opponent and submitted and finished in the second round. It might have been the third, even. Can't quite remember. I'm not gonna bother to go back and rewatch it, but I just thought Rubio was a lot more impressive with his two performances, so I'm gonna go with Rubio here. Moving on to the Fox Sports 1 main card, women's strawweight fight, Juliana Lima taking on Nina Ansaroff. Ansaroff, a newcomer, Lima losing her debut fight to Joanna Jedrzejczyk, who I thought looked really good in that fight, and Lima really got outclassed on the feet. Managed to get a takedown late in the fight, but couldn't keep Jedrzejczyk down for long at all, and had nothing on the feet for her. And I don't know anything about Ansaroff, so we're going to have to move on. Can't make a pick there. Next fight at welterweight, Claudio Silva versus Leon Edwards. Another newcomer in Leon Edwards that I don't know anything about. Claudio Silva, coming off of his debut win and a year-long layoff against Brad Scott, TUF Smashes veteran. I picked Scott to win that fight. I thought he had a couple of impressive performances, or one really. Submission win over Michael Kuiper. From what I remember, Silva just outstruck him on the feet. Scott couldn't work his clinch game, couldn't get in close. I think Silva was leg kicking him. Not a very memorable fight. But I thought for the most part he looked like an average talent. Really nothing to get excited about. But I can't make a pick. So moving on, and now we get into the only real relevant fights on the entire card, top three fights on the main card, and this is actually a fight I'm looking forward to, and I think a really good matchup at welterweight. Warlley Alves, winner of TUF Brazil 3, taking on Alan Jouban, coming off of a great, I believe it was a head kick knockout of Seth Baczynski, or it says knockout by punch here, but I think he caught him with a head kick, if I remember correctly. But anyway, a pretty impressive debut performance, knocking out a guy in Seth Baczynski who's been around the UFC for a long time, coming from TUF, being released, coming back, and having some decent performances. This is a good fight, a good matchup. I am taking Warlley Alves to win, but usually with these TUF winners, you see them kind of feed them really low-level guys, and you wish they would get a bigger test, or at least I do. I like to see TUF winners get bigger tests. A lot of times they'll even give them guys who lost in the house from other editions of TUF. I remember Honey Jason, after he won, they gave him Sam Sicilia, I think was his first opponent after winning. But I think Jouban, I think, is going to be vastly outskilled relative to Alves. But I thought he looked real tough against Baczynski. I think he got caught early in that fight. Came back and ended up knocking out Baczynski. But Warlley Alves, winner of TUF Brazil 3, clearly head and shoulders better than anyone else in the house, and just seemed to be on a totally different talent level. Lethal, superb athlete, very athletic. I think he finished one guy with knees from the tie clinch, and another one with he pulled guard on the feet for a standing guillotine. I think finished both of them in the first round, just ran over his opponents. And then in the finale, it was kind of impressive. They showed a lot of patience against his opponent. I thought he could have gotten him out of there a lot earlier, but against Marcio Alexander, waited till the third round, took him down with ease, and got that submission late in the fight. But Warlley Alves just seems to have very proficient technical striking, again, great athleticism, very explosive, and good submission abilities, and good wrestler. And Alan Jouban, I've only seen his fight against Basinski. Seems to have some power, can engage on the feet, but I think Alves is the far better talent and far more skilled fighter here. I think if he uses that patience, mixes his takedowns in with his striking, I think he'll have a fairly easy time winning this fight. But still, I think the right matchup, and if Jouban is, if the hype is real, he could. I think it's a fine test for Alves, but I am picking Alves to win. I think he's just far more skilled, and I do think he has a pretty bright future. I think he'll be competitive at welterweight, and I believe he won the show at middleweight, so he is dropping down here, and I think that was the right call. He looked a bit undersized at middleweight. I don't know how the weight change will affect him, if at all, but taking Alves. And on to the co-main event at flyweight, Ian McCall taking on John Lineker. I'm really surprised that a lot of people seem to be favoring McCall, at least on UFC Fantasy. McCall seems to be the vast favorite here, but I'm taking Lineker. McCall, I really haven't been impressed with him in the UFC. I mean, his win over Brad Pickett, even McCall couldn't stop talking about how slow Pickett was and how he didn't belong at flyweight, and I agree with him. So, just outpointing and circling around the cage for 3 rounds against McCall, just hopping in to land a punch and getting back out. Only doing that against a guy who he repeatedly admitted shouldn't even be at flyweight. I don't think that's very impressive. Obviously, that first fight with Demetrius Johnson, I was really impressed by that. I thought he could have finished him in that last round, but that was a long time ago, and I really don't think he's lived up to that performance since then. I mean, the second fight with Demetrius Johnson didn't look at all like the same fighter from the first fight. The fight with Bruno, or Iliarde Santos, Chris Carriasso was able to finish Iliarde Santos. Yuri Alcantara ran over Santos before McCall fought him, and McCall again went to the decision and really, he I think he set some record for leg kicks in that fight, but again, just doesn't seem like a super dominant or super dangerous striker, and hasn't really been able to work his wrestling like he did against Demetrius Johnson in any of his other fights. I don't think he fought anyone between Santos and Pickett. No, he didn't. So, I just haven't been impressed with him. And John Lineker, on the other hand, I think he's fought top guys. Even his loss to Ali Bagutinov, he didn't get dominated really, and never got badly hurt. I mean, if anything, Bagutinov didn't want to stand with him in that fight. Has had a lot of knockouts over not very good competition. But like I just said, Ian McCall has only had decision wins over not very good competition. And his last fight against Alptek and Oskilic, everyone was saying he's going to out-wrestle Lineker, and he didn't at all. Lineker outstruck him, defended the takedown very well. I think Lineker's real good. Great hand speed. I think his hands have improved drastically from some of his early fights. I remember the Azamat Gashimov fight and the fight against Arusha Tani. This looked very kind of heavy-handed, really trying to force the knockout. Didn't show any patience, didn't show a jab. And then in the fights with Phil Harris and Oskilic, great hand speed, putting combinations together very well. Improved patience, but still aggressive. I think he's really good, and I think he's closer, pretty close to those elite guys. Those guys who have elite status, like McCall and Benavidez. Those guys in the division. I don't think McCall's circling around the cage and getting in to land a strike and getting back out quickly. I don't think that style's going to be effective here against Lineker. I think Lineker will be able to cut off the cage, chase him down, blitz him. McCall, I think, might have the edge with the wrestling, but I think Lineker's just been a lot more impressive. I'm going to take Lineker here to win the decision. And moving on to the main event, light heavyweight, Shogun Rua taking on Ovince St. Preux. Like I said, I think this is just a more intriguing matchup. I think it's a bigger test for St. Preux, and some questions are really going to be answered here about St. Preux. Again, I was looking forward to seeing Manuwa get back in there after his loss to Gustafsson, which was fairly competitive up to the point of him getting knocked out. But again, I thought that was an easier fight for Manuwa than it is for St. Preux. But Shogun Rua, obviously a legend, one of the best guys ever to fight, most successful guys, but he's just been on the decline. I liked his win over James Tahuna, quick knockout over Tahuna, but I think Tahuna, after that, losing to Nate Marquardt, I think we've seen how limited he really is, and I don't think he ever belonged in those big fights with Teixeira and Shogun and even Marquardt in his last fight. So in hindsight, I don't think that win over Tahuna was really all that meaningful, and honestly, I don't think Shogun has had a meaningful win since he beat Forrest Griffin in the rematch and the Dan Henderson fight, but he lost that. So the last real relevant win, I think, was over Forrest Griffin. Even against Brandon Vera, looked terrible. Went to the fourth round. Seems to gas pretty early after a couple of rounds. Even the last Dan Henderson fight, I thought he lost some steam, and getting knocked out by Dan Henderson, an old, slow, battered Dan Henderson who had just been knocked out prior to that fight. I really don't think that's a good sign. The losses to Chael Sonnen, just looking completely flat against Gustafsson, never able to really get inside and establish range, was just on the end of Gustafsson's jab and strikes for the entire fight. Just seemed to really be stuck in one gear, and just doesn't seem to have a really serviceable striking game where he can go 3 rounds for the duration of a fight, just striking with a guy if he's not able to connect and get that knockout early. Obviously, I think he did have that before the fight with Lyoto Machida, the first one where he won. Very calculated, patient, with the leg kicks, but I think now that he's just lost a lot of mobility and athleticism, I think he really has to chase that knockout early on. And Ovince St. Preux being the younger guy, I think he's obviously a lot bigger, 6'3", and Shogun is let me see here. Okay, Shogun is 6'1", but still I think St. Preux is the bigger guy, and being the younger guy, I think he's gonna have the deeper gas tank, and if he can stay out of trouble early, survive, I think that third round and on he'll really have the advantage and just wear down Hua, especially Shogun. We've seen him really utilize the clinch later in fights, like in the Brandon Vera fight, when he's tired. And I think Preux being the bigger guy and the better athlete at this point, I think he'll win that clinch battle late in the fight all day. And on the feet, I think St. Preux, when he came out against Ryan Bader, I thought he was the more creative striker, and I thought Bader looked uncomfortable striking with him in that fight, and really had to resort to the takedowns. And while Shogun has a decent wrestling game, I don't see him out wrestling St. Preux like Ryan Bader did. I just don't. He doesn't have that style of fighting. Going for the takedown over and over again. And I just think Preux's going to be the more creative striker. He seems to be developing his own kind of an orthodox style, and like Gustafsson was able to keep Hua on the outside for the entire fight, I think Preux will have success there. I just don't see Hua being able to close the distance and being able to getting close enough to land those big shots that he needs to do to hurt Preux. Obviously, I think it wouldn't surprise me if Hua landed something big early, was able to establish range, but especially it being a 5-round fight, I think Preux is going to have the cardio advantage and really the overall striking advantage deeper into the fight. So I have to go with St. Preux here. And Hua's just looked like he's losing a couple steps with each fight. And it's been proven that guys can put him away. Chael Sonnen, Dan Henderson, even in the first Dan Henderson fight, Henderson really hurt him, and even Brandon Vera really busted him up in their fight. And I do think Preux is a rising talent, even if he hasn't proved it against any top guys yet. I'm going to take St. Preux here. I think he'll win a decision, but still, he might be too green and might not be there yet. I could see Hua getting the early knockout, but I definitely don't see Hua winning a decision or winning the fight late, being the third round or later. So I'm going to go with St. Preux. Alright guys, those are my predictions for UFC Fight Night 56, Shogun versus St. Preux. Thanks a lot for watching. Check out my picks for Fight Night 55, Rockhold versus Bisping. Please like the video, comment with any of your thoughts or challenges, subscribe, and I'll be back soon with my predictions for 180, Verdum versus Hunt, and Fight Night 57, Edgar versus Swanson, which that main event, I'm really looking forward to it. I've loved the Conor McGregor hype and everything he's been doing in and out of the cage, but that Edgar Swanson fight, I think it's very rare. We used to get these fights to really determine the true number one contender. Back in a couple years ago, the number one contender fights were a lot more common, but this Edgar versus Swanson fight, this is a true number one contender fight, and the winner of this, I think, is really deserves that shot. And I think will give if it's Edgar, I think he'll give Aldo a competitive fight. The first one was competitive, and Swanson definitely also would deserve a rematch. Getting past Edgar, two real high level guys. Really looking forward to Edgar versus Swanson. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Take care, and I'll see you next time. Bye.